I'm going to make the stem for the lotus flower now. I've got an 18 gauge wire, which is a thickish wire. Remember, the lower the number, the stiffer the wire, the thicker the wire. And to prepare this wire, I'm going to use my pliers to bend over a hook. So this hook is probably about 1/4 of an inch. I'll give it a little squeeze there. And this will ultimately hold the center of the lotus pod. So it's about 1/4 of an inch, if you can see. Got that ready to go. And now I'm going to use some yellow seed head stamens. These are kind of a pale yellow seed head stamen. Lotus flowers have all kinds of stamens. Some don't seem to have any seeds at all on them. Some have thicker seeds. So I think it's all up to you how you want this to look. This is a bunch of them. I'm using 2 groups of them, and this is 20 in each group. I like a little bit more stamens around the pod, but you could certainly decide what you want. And I got 2 flowers out of each bunch of stamens that I use. So with those stamens, I'm going to tie them together. And this is a 33 gauge wire, a very, very thin wire. You could use a 30 gauge wire as well. It just needs to be sort of a thinnish wire. I'm going to take my stamens and sort of even them up. They don't have to be perfectly even. And then I'm going to take the middle of the wire and align it with the middle of the stamens, and I'm going to give that a wrap around just to sort of tighten that up there. Then I'm going to take both wire pieces, and twist. And this twisting motion will tighten it up there in the center. So I'm just going to twist a bit. There. Some of them will get all caught up, but don't stress about that. It's not important. And I'll do this second one. So again, I'm going to somewhat line them up. Align the middle of the wire with the middle of the stamens. Give it a good wrap around, and then a twisting motion to attach these. These are fairly stiff stamens. They're what I've got right now. I probably would be happier with some softer stamens, but this is what I've got, so this is what we're going to use. And now I'm going to bend them in half. I'm going to squash them in half there so they, right where I attached them, like that. I'll do it with the other one. It seemed to lost its middle a little bit. Just a little squash like that. Good. And I'm going to attach these onto the main 18 gauge stem. I want to leave about half an inch on here, and I'm just going to eyeball that because that's where I'll stick the seed pod in. So I want to leave room for that. So I'll put these on either side. Right. And then I'm going to take my full width floral tape. Remember, floral tape is just paper with glue on each side. To release the glue, you stretch it a bit. Stretch it in sections. Don't stretch the whole thing out because you may not use the whole thing. So just stretch what you need. What I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap it. So I'm catching bottom of the stamens just a little bit. I'm going to overlap it. And then I'm going to give it a good wrap around to get it attached there. Now from here, I'm going to angle the tape downward. I'm going to angle the tape downward as I twirl the 18 gauge wire in between my thumb and forefinger here. I'm not angling it at too deep an angle because I want to get as much tape as possible wrapping around this stem. The stems of lotus blossoms are fairly thick, so I want to bulk up with this tape. And I'm not even taping all the way down at this point because I just really want to attach those 33 gauge wires that I used for the stamens. So there we go. And these don't need to be evened out too much. From here, I want to dust these a nice yellow color. I think they'll look prettier if they're a little bit yellower in color. And so I'm taking over some paper toweling so that I don't dirty up my board. And I've got some daffodil yellow here that I'm going to use to color. Actually, I think this is canary yellow, but daffodil yellow works just as good. And I'm brushing it on the stamens all over, twirling it so that I get both sides. And these stamens are nice because they do absorb the color. So I'm trying to get it on the stamens and none on anything else really. There we go. Got all nicely colored up. And on the lotus blossom, the stamens aren't evenly spaced, so don't stress if yours aren't either. I think they give it a more natural look if they're not. Okay, so we have it nicely colored. It's kind of popping out at you now, and we'll move forward. To make the center of the lotus flower, the pod, so to speak, I'm going to use green gum paste. I've colored this with a light moss green, with a green, just a dot of moss green to make it a light moss green color. But I've also added just a little bit of fondant to this to slow the drying process. The fondant slows down the drying. It'll still dry really firm, but I'll have more time to work at it before it dries out. I find green and dark colors in general dry very quickly. I'll still dust this with some green, but now I have the luxury of a little extra time to work with it. So I'm going to work some vegetable shortening, white vegetable shortening, into my green paste. This. And I have a ruler here, and I want about an inch size ball. Let's see what I got here. I have about an inch. I have about an inch size ball. An inch size ball, or it's about 2 centimeters. So an inch or 2 centimeters. Whatever you're working in. Then I'm going to roll this into a cone shape. A bit of cone shape like this. And it's still about an inch or 2 centimeters long. So it doesn't get longer, just changes shapes. Now this cone shape, I'm going to flatten out the wide part of the cone shape. Flatten it out. I don't have a very long nub here, maybe about ½ an inch. You don't need much. You can decide how wide you want your lotus. I like mine rather wide. I think that's one of the prettier parts of the lotus, so I'm flattening that out. Trying to maintain its round shape. So mine I've flattened out, and it's about an inch and a quarter now, or about 3 centimeters. That's what mine's looking. As I say, you can make yours as you want. And I have just that slight cone down there at the bottom. From here, I'm going to make little indentations in it. You can use a couple of things. I like these toothpicks, the little Asian style toothpicks that have sort of the flat edge at one end. And I usually start by making one in the center, right there, just a little indentation, and then going around I'll make 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go a little bit wider. Just remember, all these indentations get a little ball of yellow paste. So if you're feeling kind of lazy, don't make a lot of indentations because you have to fill those in with little balls. But if you're feeling like you've got a lot of energy, make a bunch of these in because I think they look pretty with a lot of seed pods in there. Now I'm going to take a pair of tweezers, and these are just a cheap pair of eyebrow tweezers that I got at the dollar store. I have some nice long flat tweezers that work really nice, but those were expensive. These are very reasonable. And I'm going to go along the edge here and scallop it. So I'm just reaching in, squeezing slightly, just a slight squeeze. If you've ever done any crimping, it's a little bit like crimping. He jumped. Just along the outer edge here to give it a bit of a scallop shape. There we go. And I'll smooth it out just a little bit, just so it has a little bit of a bumpy look to it. Good. Now from here I'm going to put this on my prepared stem. So here's my prepared stem. And I'm going to take my gum glue on a brush, and I'm going to paint that hook. Paint that exposed hook there. I'll take my prepared pod at the narrow end, and I'll push it right into the hook. If it flattens slightly or distorts the shape a little bit, you can go back and play with it. Don't worry so much about evening out the stems. The stems don't really sit evenly in the pod anyway, so don't worry about evening out the stems quite yet. We'll get that when we start to add the petals on. And now I'm going to set this in styrofoam to dry while I make all those little yellow seed heads, and then we'll come back and put them on. For the little seeds that go inside the lotus base, I'm using actually yellow fondant. This is pre-colored yellow fondant that is a nice bright yellow color. It doesn't need to be gun paste. It's not going to be a petal that holds its shape or something that will, with humidity, droop in any way. And because fondant dries slowly, it gives me an opportunity to work with it for a longer period of time. So for these little seeds, I'm using fondant. How big are these seeds? If you look at lotus flowers, some of them are rather large sitting up on the pod, these seeds, and some of them are very small. I tend to go for the smaller ones. So I just pinch off a little piece, roll it in the palm of my hand into like a little ball shape, and you can see I've made a whole bunch of these here so that I'll have a choice of the shapes to use when I put them on my pod. So I'm going to elevate the camera now for you so that you can watch me put these into the pod. So here's my pod ready for the little seeds to go into them. They look really pretty when they're raised up. But before I attach those, I'm going to dust this just with a little of the lime green. So I have a little bit of lime green here and a brush, and I'm just going to brush along the edge here with some of this lime green. I'm not going to get crazy on the color again because it's not going to be very noticeable, but it will add a deeper shading, just another layer of texture to the flower, and I like sort of those layers of texture to the flower. And I'll just give it a little quick brush around in here. I don't want it to be thoroughly covered. I like it when it has highlights of color. It almost looks like the sun shining on it in different ways, but I'm just going to give it just a little bit of color here, and this will match up with the leaf later when we do the leaf. Okay, so I have this done. Move this off to the side. Move my paper towel over and bring on the little yellow things. So I have made a bunch here just so I can sort of pick and choose, and have a little toothpick to help me with my fine motor skills. And I'm going to take some gum glue. Remember that gum glue is just about a 1/4 teaspoon of white gum paste dissolved in about a tablespoon of water. I'll start in the center here, so I'm going to make a dot in the center. I'm not going to make a deep puddle of water of gum glue in there, just enough to attach it. I'll pick this up with my little toothpick and pop it in there. So it's going to sit a little bit high up in there, and once I get these done, I'll give you a close-up of it. And then I'm just going to attach these all one by one into the center. So I'll show you another couple, and then I'll finish them off and get back to you. Right there. So the toothpick or a pair of tweezers, you know, something just kind of help you move the little balls to their location without messing up their form too much. So that's how we do it, and I'm going to insert the rest of these and then give you a nice close-up look of it. Here are all the seeds attached to the center of my lotus pod. It took probably about 7 or 8 minutes for me to do this, so don't think that this will be a real time-consuming thing, but just remember that if you don't want to do all of this, I would do about 10. 10 would be a good number, starting in the center and radiating outward, and then make them just a little bit larger. So you don't have to do this number if you don't want to. Now I'm going to attach this onto my prepared stem, and let's find that hooked center in there. There's the hooked center. I'm going to take some gum glue on a brush, and I'm going to soak that hooked center with gum glue. And then I'll take the center of this and pop it right on like that. Now at this point it's pretty fragile, so what I'll do is set this aside to dry, and then I'll attach my petals to it. I won't worry so much about distributing the stamens yet, because this is kind of wobbly, so I'm just going to set this in, the stem into a styrofoam block, and allow it to dry for about 4 to 6 hours, and then I'll attach the petals and play with the stamens a little bit.